It's really unbelievable to think that Ratchet and Clank is officially 20 years old. Ever since I played the first ever Ratchet and Clank game along with its sequels on the PS2, I was obsessed with it to the point that I recognized all the cutscenes, the planets, not to mention that I played this game multiple times similar to Ocarina of Time, even though it was New Game Plus repeatedly, but still. This isn't a review or a retrospect of the very first Ratchet and Clank game, because I want to do something different. I want to do an analysis on one planet that I've been thinking about for so many years. And for me personally, it's honestly a miracle that no one talked about this planet aside from speedrunning tactics. Considering that most of the planets from the original managed to make it in the 2016 remake, it's honestly a pleasure to look back on one of these planets just to see how they held up. And for me personally, this planet that we're going to be talking about really sums up the fact that this was one of Insomniac Games' first experiences with the PS2 along with the universe of Ratchet and Clank. And that planet is Umbris, the final planet of Act 1 of the game. And for me personally, ever since I watched my brothers played this level for the very first time nearly 2 decades ago, I was in fear when they were playing this planet. Because let me tell you, one of the enemies is really scary, which we're going to get to much later, but at the same time, over the next several years, more than a decade, I grew accustomed to this planet, to the point that it's becoming one of my most favorite planets from not only from this game, but in any other Ratchet and Clank game. And for me personally, it's honestly a shame that no one talked about this planet in detail, regardless if it's mostly for speedrunning tactics. To showcase my analysis of this planet, I have gathered gameplay footages from other users along with my own gameplay footage, just to show how it makes sense onto why that in the original, this is one of the most original planets, and it never got remaked, even though I really wanted ROM hacks to do it, but more on that later. First, I'd like to point out that whenever I go back to playing this game, even during times when I got nothing else better to do, it would be mostly on planet Umbris, because compared to the other planets from this game, it really feels like the most experimental enemies, along with the structure of the planet itself, was focused on Umbris. Like, considering that after this game we never had a planet similar to Umbris, mainly at the fact that the enemies don't appear aside from the Ratchet and Clank 3 multiplayer game. Not to mention that it has one of the most memorable boss battles in the franchise, if you're new to the classic trilogy. Like, for me personally, whenever I look at this game from this planet alone, it really sums up that they never come back to this planet when it comes to inspiration. And considering that nearly every single enemy aside from the sharks are basically machines, really sums up the fact that this obstacle course shows the dark side of Captain Quark, and after this video game, his character had changed. And for me personally, the more I think about it, it really gave me the impression that Captain Cloak was going to be a lot more serious, regardless if he was being used in order to take down Ratchet and Clank because of Chum and Trek. But then again, the way I see it, it's not like I was expecting much from Captain Quark since I played Ratchet and Clank 2 and 3. And when it comes to the future series and onwards, that's a different story entirely, especially the film. Getting back on track, the examples that I'm going to be showing you after my playthroughs, along with watching speedruns and walkthroughs from other users, is to show that this planet is definitely Insomniac Games' experimental planets. And for me personally, I really wish that ROM hackers would have the ability to change the enemy layouts of the planet to make the planet seem like an Ocarina of Time Master Quest version in order to be much more difficult. But to be honest with you, compared to this game and Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time was from the N64, and when it comes to this being a PS2 game, it's difficult to do everything. Well, a game has this better graphics and the fact that it really feels like that the only way for this planet to be difficult is to have a randomizer by using only the specific weapons that you get while going to this planet for the first time, and try to go through it by doing speedrunning tactics. If I'm gonna be perfectly honest, speedrunners who played this randomizer hack of the game really sums up the fact that they know experience of the planet, along with a while doing different techniques, mainly using different weapons and gadgets. And I gotta be real with you, it's literally the closest way we're ever going to play a Ratchet & Clank game completely different, especially when this game is officially 20 years old. But at the same time, it really goes to show that even during the present, we still haven't been able to do a lot of access of the game coding in this game, mainly the enemies and somewhat. And regardless if you say that, well, Ocarina of Time had the same issue, but like I said earlier, it was an N64 game. And the way I see it, this game is a lot more complicated to code in since it's a DVD game instead of a cartridge game. And for me personally, even if I'm not an expert on ROM hacks, I know full well that cartridges are a lot more simple to handle compared to DVD discs. Granted, Mario Kart Wii will beg a differ, but that's a different story. My playthroughs through this game is mostly experimenting the homing mines. I mean, granted, the other enemy that is a lot more difficult to handle, well, the Bomber Maxwell, it just shoots out bombs, but at the same time, the most enemy that people will remember from this planet is the homing mines. Regardless if you think that the Bomber Mags are much more problematic compared to the mines, but my point is that whenever I play this game, I always experiment the mines by using decoys, the taunter sometimes, and the fact that whenever I do something with the decoys, the homing mines do something completely different, and yet at the same time, whenever if you are doing something that is completely unexpected from the enemies, then you can easily tell that this is further proof that this is really 2002 standards. I always think to myself that Planet Umbris was one of the most fleshed out planets when it comes to enemies, being intelligent regardless of the machines. But at the same time, whenever you use the taunter on this specific bridge, you would probably expect all the mines to gain up on you, but whenever I used it, one of the mines in the back completely caught you and attacked you, while the other mines just don't do anything, and whenever a mine reacts, it just happens off screen most of the time, which is one of the complaints that people have whenever they use the taunter on this planet. For me personally, I really thought for a second that all the mines would definitely attack me. Granted, I could have been farther away from them or closer to them, but the way I see it, it really feels like this game really is the definition of experimental in 2002 standards. If you really think for a second that if you are willing to go through the entire planet by experimenting the taunter onto enemies as way worse so compared to the other enemies on different planets, then you won't believe it until you try out for yourself. And in all honesty, there is no other way that any other person will go through this entire planet by using the taunter, because it's not possible. Even if you try everything to dodge the mines and try to have them be destroyed by one of the obstacles on this planet, then it would probably be a lot more complicated to do so in order to memorize the layout of the level design. Believe me when I say this, is that whenever someone plays this game to do a different strategy that hasn't been done before, you can really tell that they want to do the experimental ideas on an experimental planet, even if they don't want to. Matt Omega completely did a Suck Cannon 1 back in 2021, and he went through Umbris by being a pacifist. Like, let's be real. The fact that he can't be able to suck anything from this planet sums up that he is desperate to do something that no other person has done in the history of Ratchet and Clank playthroughs. Like, the more I watch these moments when it comes to people experimenting their ideas on this planet, the more we learn from them, to the point that I'm starting to convince that for anyone who hasn't tried this out before would probably be in a position where they're not this risky to do it, or the fact that they just rather play the game normally because they're not speedrunners or that curious of the planet itself. In fact, one of the most popular moments when it comes to Ratchet and Clank is, I kid you not, if you are in between the mines while they're moving on the bridge, they won't track you. So if you go into the middle, you're completely safe. And for me personally, I always thought that in the inside, the mines won't track you. I mean, you can instantly tell that if you go to the left or right side of the mines, they will instantly track you. And if you think that going to the other side, it won't affect you. But unfortunately, I did it myself, and it's further proof that it's only in the spots on the bridges and certain spots of the level where they won't be able to track you completely. I'm really convinced that one of the reasons onto why they made this is because they wanted to do some Easter eggs in order for you to figure out for yourself. And the Easter egg is to go through this entire planet by doing a different playthrough style. Mainly a pacifist, or just ignore the mines altogether because, well, you want to save ammo, even if you may miss out so much bolts. If you ask me, the fact that this game has this element into it is further indication that the people at Insomniac are trying to do something different, since that this isn't Spiral anymore. To the point that you can actually touch a mine, but at the same time it won't affect you. And I'm not kidding you, it's actually true. It's just that the game itself can't be able to track off of every single enemy in one place. And even though it may be the case in future planets, in this planet on the other hand, with most of the enemies being machines, it really feels like that Captain Quark made these machines, but they're not really fully compatible when it comes to being the most intelligent machines of all time. Seriously. Mines or not, these mines aren't really as clever when it comes to attacking Ratchet, even though that whenever you use the Taunter at one of the worst spots, they will only track you whenever they feel like it. Like, that's really what I feel whenever a homing mine would instantly attack you completely randomly, then just gain up on you by completely killing you. But since that this analysis is on the other enemies, let's go talk about the Bombermatics. Believe me when I say this, I tried to go through the entire obstacle course by using the wrench, and for me personally, it wasn't simple. Game Master completely went through this entire planet back in 2015 with the wrench, and when it comes to his Umbris playthrough, it's never been done before. And believe me when I say this, when this is the only way to go through the entire planet by going through the wrench, and this person right here went through the entirely of it back in 2015, is an accomplishment. Like, you have to give this guy credit that he was the first, and during his multiple playthroughs, he had a difficult time by skipping through two of those Bombermatics from the beginning in order to go through the final room with the Bombermatics in order to have 5 healths. And since that he was playing this game that isn't New Game Plus, he went through the entire planet with 4 lives, and he had to save an extra health container for the sake of going through the room of 4 bomber mechs. For me personally, when I first watched this for the first time, when it comes to me watching Umbris videos, it's honestly amazing to think that years later, people have been mimicking this playthrough for the sake of just trying to go through the entire planet by using the wrench with no weapons whatsoever. And then at the same time, when it comes to speedrunners who just skip through the entire planet by doing infinite long jumps, is honestly starting to become the cheaper way to go through the entire planet. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know infinite long jumps are difficult, and speedrunners are experts when it comes to completing the game fast as possible, but at the same time, since that we experienced speedrun even before that this video came out, it's honestly something unexpected that someone is willing to go through an entire playthrough of Ratchet and Clank by using the wrench and nothing more. Then again, when people go through this entire planet on the first try, it's always in the beginning when they only have 5 weapons to cooperate. The Bomb Glove, the Pyrosator, the Blaster, the Glove of Doom, and of course the Mind Glove, which also is cooperable with the Taunter, but let's be real, it's not a good idea to use the Taunter on this planet. Like, when people play this game in New Game Plus, they have all the weapons that they have from the first playthrough and use them to the point that it's becoming OP in the earlier planets. But when it comes to newcomers, even if some of them may be interested into completing this game 100% while also being a hardcore gamer on this planet, keep this in mind. Some of the people who play other games aren't fully attached towards this game, and I can instantly tell into why that there are less and less videos while people are playing this game in New Game Plus, all the while using different weapons in order to go through some of the planets as fast as possible. Which is why that when you see this video that I'm showing you right now, the Umbris one in New Game Plus, the player are going through the planets with different weapons. And for me personally, it's an indication that you can tell that there are so many different ways to take down the enemies with different formats that you'll probably be surprised. But before we get into that, I need to show you one more thing involving the mines wherever you use the Taunter. If you want to know onto how much that this is definitely to the 2002 standards, when you use the Taunter behind that wall, well, the mines are behind, whenever you get to that section after pressing all 3 of the buttons, when you use the Taunter, they go through the walls. I'm not making this up, they actually go through the walls as a result. And I've experienced this so much that it just feels like you probably didn't realize that the wall itself can allow mines to go through it with no problem. But at the same time, the mines still are attached to the wall because they can't go through it. And I guess it could be either a glitch that they can go through a portion of the wall, but at the same time, they can't be able to go through the wall 100% without you moving to a different section that allows them to go through the wall with no problem. Maybe it's either me or the fact that I realized this whenever I saw that video, if you use that person accidentally used a Taunter with the boxes and they just didn't see the mines going through that wall. Like, he assumed that it was spawning from different locations, but at the same time, not every single person realizes the world building of Ratchet and Clank and the level layout of the planets themselves, mainly Umbris. Like, if people didn't went through this planet when it comes to the amount of weapons that they have, I'm going to assume that they either just focus on the story and trying to complete this game as quickly as possible. Granted, it's not an issue, but whenever I go back to this planet and look at these details, it sums up at the fact that this planet alone really shows that it's not the planet that is fully structured when it comes to the walls and other materials. Like, even if you may say that it's honestly not that big of a deal, knowing full well that you wouldn't go through these plants again with the amount of weapons that you have. But since that I'm one of the only guys who realize this detail, really goes to show that it made me appreciate the effort that Insomniac did in the first Ratchet and Clank games, even after 20 years. Trust me, the more you learn to use these weapons against the mines, especially with the decoy glove, you can understand that they have a mind of their own, even though that they're programmed mostly undeveloped, which sums up the standards of 2002. Okay, so one of the weapons that I used in New Game Plus were the Morphaway, and the fact that the mines can actually track down the chickens really goes to show that no matter if you use the normal Morphaway or the golden Morphaway, the mines still hate chickens. And the fact that they actually explode once they touch them, goes back to my point that you can instantly touch a mine, but they still explode. I mean, granted, the clip I showed you before was a completely different story since that it was from Matt Omega, but still. But the one thing that I did that I was completely shocked ever since I've been thinking about it and when I'm ever going to do it was the Taunter and Drone combo. I know, it's completely crazy, but believe me when I say this. When I jump over that fence that was towards the end of the game, not really towards the end, but still, I use the Taunter immediately while using the drones as a shield. And believe it or not, I managed to get rid of all the mines. I'm not making this up. I'm not talking about the 112 mines, I meant the 212 mines. And you know what I did? The next time I made more gameplay footage, I did it again, and shockingly enough, it was the same result. I'm not making this up, this is actually true. Like, I'm really starting to convince that the mines that didn't gain up on me disappeared. And I actually have proof of that, but we're gonna get to that later. But yeah, I did the Taunter and Drones combo that I'm starting to convince that if anyone is willing to play through this entire planet by using the Taunter and Drones, I would definitely see something out of it when it comes to a Ratchet and Clank playthrough. I mean, believe me when I say this. The drones may be attached to the turrets once you get close to them, but at the same time, you have to give this a shot. This is actually a really good gaming experience. And I can guarantee you that when it comes to other gaming experiences by doing different weapons, this is the type of gaming experience that I actually want to see Ratchet and Clank players to go through the entire planet of Umbris by doing this combo. So whenever I use the decoy glove and the mines, you need to understand one thing, is that the mines that don't move do explode regardless, but the mines that do move are gonna stay there for a very long time. So there's one thing to note, that the mines will follow you when it comes to moving mines permanently. They don't explode. So, what I did is that I used the Taunter and glove, the decoy glove, and luckily enough, one of the mines are stuck to one of the branches or one of the grasses, and once I went back to my ship and used the decoys in order to lure the mine back, guess what happens? And then it disappears. It just disappears. Yeah, I'm not kidding. They actually disappear if they go farther away from their position. Believe me when I say this, this is honestly one of those enemy placements that is limited when it comes to the location that they're set in. And this happened to me quite a lot ever since I've noticed it. When I use the decoys into a farther away place, and then the mines just instantly disappear. Like, compared to the Taunter and drone combo, I'm starting to convince that the reason why some of those mines didn't instantly attack Ratchet completely is that the game couldn't process all the mines in one location. Like, it was on the bridge, but in a different location. They can't be able to have the power and money to do all that at once. Again, this was all in 2002, and for me personally, if this actually happened in 2022, then there's a chance that it will happen. Oh, who am I kidding? 20 years has passed, it would definitely happen 100%. You know, the fact that the mines have been used from this planet and in Hoven and in that Captain Quark space battle, and again in the swimming maze on Chemidrek's fleet, and used in the final boss, really goes to show that Insomniac Games were trying to do something unique when it comes to these types of enemies, and believe me when I say this, it really shows. Since that the first Ratchet and Clank reused enemies in future planets, it really feels like that they just need to cooperate for what they have and what they can do when it comes to the limitations. In the next game, they managed to have every single planet to have different enemies. Even if there were a few exceptions here and there, they still managed to do a lot more enemies compared to the first Ratchet and Clank game. The only details I didn't mention was the swimming glitch where you can swim throughout the entire level, but to be honest, it's not that important, and it's probably for those players who can't be able to do the infinite long jump glitch. That's literally the only elements that I can mention involving this planet alone, and the examples that I haven't learned isn't really worth being discovered unless if you're really curious like I was. Mainly playing through this planet and doing the details that I showed you in this video. With that being said, there's really nothing else I can talk about involving Umbris. I mean, granted, there's the boss between the Snaggle Beast, but at the same time, it's mostly integral of the plot, involving Captain Quark's development, and I really don't need to discuss a lot about that, considering that people are highly familiar with Captain Quark, and the fact that the boss is just a boss, and it's one of the first bosses of the series, so it's not like that if I skip on it, it's not that important. And for me personally, it really sums up with the fact that this game is a lot more older after 20 years, and for anyone who played this game non-stop can instantly tell that this game has aged just compared to the later series. It's a lot more different compared to Ratchet and Clank 2 and 3, and the future games if you want to include them. If I wanted this video to be much more longer, is by doing more details of the enemies, of how they react, doing different weapons, and doing more things, or just watch more videos from people online. But to be honest with you, I think enough is enough, and the only thing I can show you is the mines actually appear on your second visit of Hoven after completing it. Am I literally the only one who knows this? Is anyone mostly aware that this actually happened during the revisit to Hoven? Though at the same time, this video was a long time coming. Like, I was planning on making this video sometime in the past, mainly the fact that I want to give my own perspective on this planet, and when the 20th anniversary came around, it was the perfect opportunity, especially that Umbris was part of the very first Ratchet and Clank game. Like, if you ask me, if you have different experiences on this planet, it will be mostly understandable knowing forward that this planet is basically one of the most original planets from any other Ratchet and Clank game, even to this day. Which is why that they never emulate it in later games, either the fact that it was too scary, or the fact that they're trying to do different techniques when it comes to different enemies with different weapons. So for me personally, I really found that this video alone is mostly a demonstration of what I felt involving Ratchet and Clank's Umbris, which is really saying something considering that in future games there was an exclusive planet that they have, but they never come in the future games. Which, for me personally, I would discuss, but at the same time I don't, because this video was a lot more difficult to put together by trying to find footages of different playthroughs, and I have to make one of my own in order to get my points across. Regardless if Going Commando is one of my favorite video games, stated in my top 20 classical video games, along with the fact that next year it's reaching its 20th anniversary, it's still not worth it. And the same thing applies to Up Your Arsenal and Dead's Luck once they reach their 20th anniversaries in the following years. Overall, Planet Umbris remains as one of my favorite planets from not only from this game, but from the Ratchet and Clank series. Not to mention that it's one of the best theme songs from the game. So, if there's one thing I want from any other Ratchet and Clank player, including hackers, if it's possible, is in the future when technology is much more better and you figure out most of the details, you can try to move the enemies in different locations. I'm not expecting every single planet, but mainly from Umbris. If there's a chance, you can move the mines, the bomber mags, and other enemies into different locations in order to make the level even more challenging by chance. And of course, the Taunter and Drone combo that I shown you earlier. Like, you can probably see the details way more since that you're mostly braver to witness that I haven't, but at the same time, I just wanted to see other players do that method since that I've came up with it by myself. So I'm Lonely Fanboy 4A here, and happy 20th birthday of Ratchet and Clank.